Welcome to the Empowered Team Podcast. I'm your host, Kari Schneider, and today we are doing part 2 in our Clean Pain series. Last week, it was all about physical pain. What does physical pain do to us? How can we overcome it? And really, it's clean pain. Now, this is all about emotional pain today and the clean emotional pain. Now, if you want to get away from that negative pain, the emotions that we have that we don't want, maybe it's fear, maybe it's anger, maybe it's uncertainty, then you're not alone because that's most of our society. Here's what the data says. Almost 40%, 39% of adults worldwide report experiencing significant worry daily. And 37% report high daily stress. Both are much higher than they were a decade ago. Depression now affects over 300 million people globally and remains the leading cause of disability worldwide. Now that's costly. It's costly on human well-being. It's costly on economies and society. Close to 275 million people are living with anxiety disorders. Here's the bottom line. We're living in this collective emotional pain epidemic, and our primary strategy, which has typically been be positive, suppress, perform, it's not working. It's not working at all. So what if we have this backwards? What if we're really actually supposed to be feeling the emotional pain, which we are? So here's what culturally we get wrong. Today, I'm going to go through a few things. I'll tell you what we're going to cover today. Today, we're going to go through the impact of culture on emotion. We'll talk about what emotional pain actually is and what it is not. And what happens when you do feel emotional pain and what happens when you don't feel emotional pain. And then really, ultimately, go through how to process emotional pain. Now, this doesn't work for everyone, but most of us don't have a hot clue as to how to process emotional pain. So let's get started. I want to go back to about a year ago. And a year ago, I was experiencing and processing some of the worst emotional pain of my entire life. And I've had a lot of rough experiences in my life. But this one, I think I was in denial for so long that it was truly difficult to process. And yet I was so proud of myself for giving myself the space to grieve the loss of my marriage. And what I was grieving really was the loss of a beautiful family and the being married and the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And then also celebrating in some ways the freedom from so much pain that had been involved in the marriage as well. Now, it was hard to celebrate that because I was feeling so much emotional pain. What I learned in doing that was how little I had done any of that processing, that emotional feeling and accepting and being with the pain. I'd done very little of that in my entire life. I've been very tough and gone through a lot of hard situations, but to actually be with and feel the negative emotions, I really hadn't done that in my life, and it contributed to a lot of challenges for me. So let's dive in. Because I think that you're not averse to feeling emotional pain. We all do. Life is 50-50. And what I mean by that is there's half of life we're going to have negative emotional experience and half of life we're going to have positive emotional experience. And that's not what typically happens. We go through life believing that we're supposed to be feeling a whole bunch of positive emotions all of the time, and that's not what happens. We're supposed to feel negative emotions, yet culturally we don't. So here's what happens in our culture. The impact of our culture is that emotional pain's been made the enemy. We're set up in society to believe that we're not supposed to be feeling negative emotions. We're conditioned to believe that the emotions are problems to fix and maybe even signs of weakness or evidence that something's wrong with us. And what I've discovered, especially through someone named Dr. Susan David, she's out of Harvard Medical School, and she's a psychologist and author of a book called Emotional Agility. And she calls this, in society, the tyranny of positivity. Now, I'm all for being positive, but an authentic positivity and an acceptance of the negative that comes along. And the tyranny of positivity that she's referring to is this belief that if there's a negative emotion, there's something wrong. It needs to be fixed. It needs to go away. And that's not the case. So there's a quote that I found, and it's that tough emotions are part of our contract with life. You don't get to have a meaningful career or raise a family or leave the world a better place without stress and discomfort. Discomfort is the cost of having the wonderful, amazing things in life, is basically what it's saying. And there's a massive cost in suppressing the negative emotions instead of feeling them. So here's the thing about that. We'd like to think that if we make the negative ones go away, then we'll only just feel the positive emotions. But that's not how it works. As we suppress emotion, negative, it also suppresses the positive. And what I hear in high achieving leaders who have struggled in various areas is once they get to a point of doing this for so long, they describe feeling numb. And the numbness has come from suppressing emotion that's negative for so long that they're not tapped into being able to feel positive. They're just not feeling at all. They've clamped down on emotion so tightly that the numbness is what's left. And so we can't selectively numb some emotions and then thrive on others and feel fully expressed somewhere else. When we numb the painful emotions, we also numb the positive emotions as well. Brené Brown is a researcher in vulnerability, and she speaks to the highest achievers. We're talking business, military, you name it. She's in that mix. And one of the things she describes is that there is no vulnerability without courage. And she's gone through surveys, she's gone through research for many, many years, and asked the highest level, the people who are most successful or have been in the toughest experiences, said, can vulnerability exist without the presence of courage? And the answer is unequivocally no. Vulnerability exists in courage, with courage. Courage has to be there. So sometimes when we're thinking about negative emotions like fear or pain or anger or rejection, there's so many negative emotions. Sometimes when we are afraid to experience them, we don't realize that there's so many profound emotional states that are really good for us. And one of them is courage. Others are commitment or discipline. Are those positive or negative? I'm not sure. They might be closer to that neutral or maybe on the negative side. And that's something that our society isn't really encompassing in how we communicate or how we teach our children. That the negative emotions are just as important as experiencing the positive emotions. They are not something to avoid. We don't have the day without the night. It's the contrast, and it's the experience of being human. Every time you shut down grief, you also shut down joy. Every time you suppress fear, you also suppress excitement. You don't get to choose which emotions to turn off. I know, coming from high performance sport, being with high achievers in business as well, that there's so many times that the stoicism is the thing to lean on for so many high achievers. But those who go through and experience the discomfort, those who can understand and process their emotional pain, those are the ones who truly have the greatest success and achievement with fulfillment. Those who ignore and suppress and drive through can still achieve, but there's often an emptiness, a numbness, and a feeling of of loss and disillusionment where I thought I'd achieve this and I'd feel good, but they're not feeling anything because they haven't been feeling all the way along. The body keeps the score. So one of the things that I have experienced myself and I've watched with other people is that when we suppress emotion, it creates a container, and it's in the body. The body's language, as we talked about in the last episode of physical pain, the body's language is feeling, and emotion is contained in the body. And so when we're suppressing negative emotions or even suppressing positive emotions as well, it's being stored in the body. And so the body will eventually hold this and then come up with ways of telling us that it's not okay. And it might be tension headaches. It might be tightness in the chest. It might be a knot in the stomach. It might be knots in the shoulders. There's so many different ways that the body is holding all of this tension of suppressed emotion that has not been processed or released. So keep that in mind as we go through. So number one, really just talking about the impact of culture and how we've been conditioned to not feel certain emotions, and that emotional pain is not the enemy, but that's what our society as culture has conditioned us to believe. The next part is really, what is emotional pain? Now, I've said this a little bit in that emotional pain is a feeling. You're going to feel something in the body, but sometimes it might feel like a sinking in the gut if it's a negative emotion. But it's a vibrational frequency in the body. It's a language of the body. But it's there for a reason. We always have emotion for a reason. We as human beings, we're pretty magical creatures that everything we do scientifically typically has a purpose for us to live and experience life. Well, emotions are there for us to feel so that we can learn something more and we can grow. So what emotional pain, when we talk about clean emotional pain, we have sadness, we have loss, we have fear, we have anger. Emotional pain is data. It is not weakness. It is data. It is telling us something. Emotions, including positive, including painful ones, are information. They are not who you are. They are something that you are experiencing, and it's a signal about what matters to you, what's important to you. Now, remember that research I told you about, Dr. Susan David. She has a TED Talk that was watched by over 8 million people. And this core message that she emphasizes in her talk is that emotions are data. They're not directives. They're not supposed to tell you what to do. They can show up, and then we can mine that emotion for real information. They tell us about our values. They tell us about what we really desire. They tell us about what's important to us. And when we ignore them, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're not listening to what they're there to tell us. Now, when I say emotions are data and not directives, I think of so many of the athletes and business people that I've worked with. And this is over decades. And I was in the boat of achieve. But the more I worked with people, the more I fell in love with human spirit, the more I fell in love with people and transformation, the more I started to feel with people. So empathize with people. And so much of what I've understood in life is that everyone takes action based on emotion. And typically, the primary emotions that we're taking action on is pain. I don't care if it's in a business, but leaders in business are avoiding pain, and that's why they want to get away from some pain. Let's say the economy, the numbers are down, then they're taking action to get away from that pain, and then taking more action to avoid future pain. There's so much action that we take as human beings to avoid now pain, something get away from now pain and avoid future pain. Now, I'd rather that because this is the healthier path to take, the more fulfilled path to take, I'd rather that we're able to feel the pain that's there and then consciously choose what action to take with or without the pain. Because we may take actions that we know is going to cause some difficulty, some emotional pain, some challenge. But we take it because we know we can handle feeling that difficult pain. Too many times with too many of us in life, because of culture, because of how we were raised, we're in situations where we're simply taking so many actions to get away from a pain or to avoid a future pain, instead of knowing that we're capable of feeling any emotional experience, positive or negative, and then we're going to choose which path is going to be the best for what we want in the future of our lives. And that is that's my explanation of what Dr. Susan David is saying by saying emotions are data, they're not directives. That's my explanation for we feel them, we experience emotions, they're not who we are. And even though we often act on emotions, we can feel them so then we can choose what emotional state would I like to be in and start to generate what we would like versus just reacting to what we don't like. Okay, so in this one, I really want to say that emotional pain is data. It's not weakness, it's information. So here's what I mean about data. Your grief is data. Your anger is data. Your fear is data. They are telling you something about what you value, about what you need, about what needs to change, perhaps even. So think about this. And this was what was occurring to me in my grief last year in the loss of a long-time marriage, almost 2 decades of life together as a family and as a spouse. And so what the grief was telling me was that something mattered deeply to me. And if I could experience that, I can appreciate that negative emotion and all that came with grief. It's not weakness. It's evidence of love. It's evidence of investment. That's what grief, if I mined that data of that emotion, that's what the information is there. It's so much to learn from. If I look at something like anger is a powerful and energetic emotion, and a lot of people default to anger to kind of keep them pushing through. But anger is evidence, if it's clean anger and it's not covering up fear, because usually anger can be used to hide fear, and often fear is underneath it. But let's say it's clean anger. It's just pure, I am upset about this and there's a reason for it. It's typically information that a boundary has been crossed. It's typically an information that's saying a value of mine has been violated and it's pointing to something important. That's important to know. If we look at something like fear is there for most of us. It's the foundation of anxiety. It usually is underneath anger oftentimes, but it's telling you something. It's telling you about a threat that perhaps something you are worried about is under threat, something you care about is under threat, or you are under threat. And it is there, the fear is there, quite simply to protect you from something that you feel is threatening. It's not punishing you. It's not weakness. It's not a bad thing, but we've learned over time that we don't want to feel that way and we go away from it. This is where the emotions that we are the most afraid of are usually the emotions that have the most important message. The emotions that we want, they have the urge to avoid the most, are typically the emotions that we can glean the greatest wisdom from. Keep that in mind when the next time you're feeling really uncomfortable. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's fear, maybe it's anger, but you're feeling really uncomfortable in a negative emotion, the most uncomfortable, then that's probably the place to learn the most about yourself and about what matters to you. And that's the place where your future self is going to benefit the most from what you learned in that scenario. Okay, so now we're on to the next part of this, and it's what happens when you do feel it. What happens when you don't feel the negative emotions? Because it's a different outcome. What happens if you decide to go and feel the negative emotion? What happens if you're not feeling it? There's a person named Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and this is what I referred to. This person wrote what I referred to as the body keeps the score. And what this researcher looks at is that the body stores unprocessed emotion as physical tension, chronic pain, autoimmune disruption, and illness. Emotional pain is that it was never metabolized. It becomes eventually a physical signal. And that circles back directly to our talk on the last podcast, which is the physical pain. So in this one, if I look back at Graves' disease, autoimmune illnesses are typically a build-up of stress, a build-up of trauma, a build-up of unprocessed emotion that has been going on for so long that the body is holding on to this and cannot manage this anymore. It could be traumas, it could be current life stress, it could be chronic stress over time, it could be physical stress in your body, and this combination of physical and emotional stress that then culminates in something like an autoimmune illness and disorder. Now, that's what I experienced with Graves' disease. I chose to do a whole lot of things to get to the root cause of that illness, to put it into remission permanently. I chose to do that without medication, which I was told by the endocrinologist that I couldn't do it. It was either going to be very hard or impossible. And I was able to do it, and here's why. I went through and took a look at all the ways in my life currently and in the past that I had neglected myself, neglected my emotional self, neglected my physical self, neglected my spiritual self. Where had I neglected myself that was causing my body to be in such chronic pain? Chronic pain in physical pain, chronic pain in emotional pain, but didn't realize it because I was determined to just keep soldiering through. So an illness like Graves' disease is an example of built up physical and emotional, not processed, not healed pain. And if it keeps going, then it just gets worse because the body can't handle any more of that. That's why when I went through not only the emotional pain of divorce last year and went through the physical pain of a serious injury, I was very, very conscious of being able to process everything that was happening so that I wasn't going to revert back into a Graves flare-up or have my health go down the tubes again. And this is why this episode is so important to me. When I go to do this episode, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to share about emotional pain and personal experiences for me. It's really, really uncomfortable. But I've learned that it is so important. I've learned it through my own life experiences. I've learned it through my clients, that this is a critical thing, a critical life skill for not only your health, your well-being, and the future of what the fulfillment of your life looks like. I'll share something with you at the end that emphasizes that. So what this looks like, what happens when you don't feel it, how I describe this to my clients is that it's like, I call it the beach ball effect. I have a negative emotion. Let's say it's anxiety or fear of some work thing that's coming up. And instead of being with that emotion, I suppress it. I want to be stone-faced. I want to be stoic. I want to just plow through, pretend it's not there. And then what happens, it's like taking a beach ball and pushing it underwater. And I can do it. It's not so bad. I got to push that underwater, but it keeps trying to surface. So it takes a little more energy. It takes a little more tension and resistance and pressure to push that beach ball down. And if I hold it there, I can hold it there for time. And a couple things can happen. This is what I've seen in myself and seen in many other people. So if I keep pushing that beach ball down, trying to pretend it's not even existing, so I want to push it deeper down, then oftentimes that negative emotion will then pop up at another time when I wasn't paying as much attention or I was focused on something else, and boom, that emotion pops up unexpectedly. So tell me, you cannot tell me that there hasn't been a time where some emotion from something else that you've been stuffing then pops out on another completely different day, completely different circumstance, and you become snappy or angry about something completely different in an overreaction that was unwarranted simply because a previous emotion was left stuffed and unprocessed and suppressed. So that's what I would call the beach ball effect. Now, let's say you're stuffing that beach ball down, that emotion that you don't want to feel, and it doesn't pop up. Why doesn't it pop up? Because you've been trying so hard to resist it, to avoid it, to suppress it, to make it go away, that your body has all of this tension of trying to hold that in. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Not process it, not release it, not figure out why it's there, but hold it. And that's where then you're going to start to feel the physical sensations that come with suppressing that emotion. Maybe it's the tightness in the shoulders. Maybe it's the clenching of the jaw at night. Maybe it's the tension headache at the base of your skull, at your neck. Maybe it's the acidic stomach. But there will be physical ramifications for holding in that negative emotion that for so long without releasing it. Now, there's an alternative to this, and that is processing that emotion. So if we've looked at what happens when we don't feel it, well, what happens when you do feel it? Because when you do feel it, there's a completely different scenario. You can experience that emotion and have you have the freedom of not holding it in your body, not having it build up and pop out later. And what does that look like? If you had a beach ball, but you didn't feel like you had to grip it, but it was with you, let's say it just kept following you, and you just got to look at the beach ball for a hot second. Instead of it being in your way and it being in the way of you playing in the water, being in the way of you swimming in the water, I've got a real visual going here. But you're just with that beach ball and you take a moment and you look at it. And you take a moment and you just let yourself be with it. And then you notice that instead of it being tied to you and you can't get away from it, then you notice it's just next to you. And then you might notice that instead of you trying to stuff it down, it's just floating around and then you're next to it and you do some other things. It might still be with you. And then if you do a few things to help process it and allow it, you'll eventually find that that beach ball will tend to float away or it will tend to deflate over time. And that's a visual that I like to give people so that they don't feel so trapped as though it is them. It's not you. The emotion that you experience is not you, whether it's the positive emotion or the negative emotion. Either one of them is going to pass. You know that you're not feeling ecstatic all the time. You might have been really happy about something, but it doesn't just stay all the time. It will also pass, just like a negative emotion. It's not who you are. It's something that you're experiencing. And when you can really embrace that, then it's easier to allow to be in the storm and to allow the storm to pass without making it as though it's you. Because it's not you. It's a vibrational frequency in your body. A lot of it stems from how we're thinking about a neutral event. And then we've got this emotional experience. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's exactly how it's supposed to happen. So what does it look like to feel it? Because I've described what happens with that beach ball effect when you don't feel it, but then when you actually can process and be with it, that beach ball can float away. Logistically, though, there are ways that you can actually intentionally process emotion. Because when we deny our emotions, it owns us. When we own our emotion, we can rebuild, we can find our way through, we can process it. You don't get to skip the emotional pain. You only get to choose when you want to deal with it. Are you going to deal with it in your body as an illness eventually after years, like I did? Are you going to deal with it in the moment? Are you going to deal with it when you give yourself the space the day later? So it can be now on your terms or later on your body's terms. And that's the hard thing that I had to experience with Graves' disease. All right, so here's how emotional pain becomes your greatest asset. And in sharing this, I want to have you see the benefits that come because they are high-level leadership attributes. They are the wisest of ways of being for those of us who care about our contribution to other people and humanity and what we bring as an impact on the world. So there are huge assets that come. Your greatest pain is your greatest asset. It is the thing that makes you the most human and the most impactful. Here's how. When we name an emotion, this is an amazing thing. Here's what the research shows. When we name an emotion, just the naming of it, not I feel like blah, 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 but just I'm feeling blah. So I am feeling rejected. I am feeling sad. I am feeling mad. I am feeling scared. I am feeling just that, just naming it. That alone provides relief in the body. And when brain scans are done, it shows how much more calm someone becomes when they've just named the experience that they're having. It's part of this understanding, part of this ability to communicate. It's a really important part about being human. So let's say you can name what you've experienced, but when you've named and felt and processed emotion, it doesn't just resolve, it builds something in you. And what it builds something in you, it builds more resilience, more thriving, a true, authentic happiness, not just processing an emotion. Oh, I did that. If you're processing a negative emotion to get rid of it, then that's more resistance. You've just done more avoidance and more resistance. You've added more suffering to your life. However, if you feel a feeling that's negative and you allow yourself to be with it and you allow yourself to process it, that's when you truly get to the other side. And it might take a day, it might take a month, it might take a year, and that's okay. Whatever it looks like, that's okay. What this reveals and what this provides and builds for you is empathy. Empathy is something that comes from deeply understanding your own pain. When you have done that, you can deeply understand another's pain. When you've understood what it feels to go through that kind of hurt, you're not going to be able to feel someone else's unless you've sat with your own. Discernment is another one. Discernment is that when you've had painful experiences and it highlights what your values are, then it's discerning for you what really matters to you and what doesn't. It gives you values clarity like nothing else. Resilience. When you've gone through emotional trauma, it's not resilience, not the bounce back kind, like, oh, that was hard and here I am again, I'm good. But the real hard, battle-earned kind of resilience that says, hey, I've been there. I've learned it. I've earned it. I've experienced it. I got you because I know what this is like. And leadership. Leadership, the most credible leaders, the ones that have the attributes that make people want to follow that leader, want to learn from that leader, want to have that leader as a mentor. Those are the leaders that have been through something and can say so. And they're not bragging about it. They're still humble about it because it's a tough experience. But they've got all those other attributes and people around them can sense that and it comes through in their leadership. It's a powerful thing. Lastly, what I want to do here is really make sure that if you have the willingness and you have the desire to process a negative emotion, that you do so. And here's how it starts. If you're going to process a negative emotion, you're going to notice it first of all. And the best thing you can do, I mentioned earlier, is name it. And if you don't have a fancy feel wheel like we do in our house where there's this spectrum of different emotions, more than you can ever think of, if you don't have one of those, then keep it super simple. Sad, mad, bad, scared. Keep it as simple as possible. And when you're in an emotional state, it's often hard to, and you're not accustomed to naming the emotion, it's often hard to do so. So name it. And then the three main ways that you can process emotion are verbally, with breath work, and physically. And when you process verbally, it's helpful with a friend or a really trusted person or professional that you can have the support from. Verbally, that can be very helpful. Breath work, I'm talking about things like Kundalini yoga or box breathing, ways that you can just allow your breath to go through sequences, to allow your nervous system to calm, get into your parasympathetic nervous system, and then allow your body to release some of that emotion. And lastly, physical movement. Now, for me, I didn't know for a long time that that's what I was doing. The way I tolerated so much challenge in my life was the amount of physical intense training I was doing. I was doing very intense run training. I was usually training for races. I was doing a lot of intense lifting as well. Well, when I had Graves' disease, there were 2 years that I could barely do anything because I couldn't tolerate my heart rate being higher for any length of time because it just wasn't coming down. I wasn't getting the nervous system recovery. When I finally put Graves' disease in remission, there was still so many residual factors and stressors and going through divorce that was happening. And I still couldn't physically, because of the Graves' illness, push, and I still can't actually go to the same intensities simply because my heart rate, I have to really gradually build it up. And then what I found in having been kicked by a horse and having horrific physical pain, that I couldn't cry, I couldn't laugh. All of these life experiences forced me to have to learn how to process emotion besides my default that I didn't know that's how I was doing it, but my default of intense working out. So then I had to learn how to manage my own thoughts and verbalize what I was experiencing and go through breath work because I couldn't do the intense physical work. Now, one of the biggest things in processing without intense movement, like I wasn't able to do anymore, was the ability to name it and the ability to just be with the emotion and not try and push it away, not trying to make it wrong, not trying to get away from it or get rid of it. And those were the foundational starting points to be able to be with any negative emotion and then eventually have the capability of understanding that it's a negative emotion that we're afraid of in the world. We're not afraid of someone coming to kill us. We're afraid of the thought of it. And the emotion, the feeling of fear, that's what we're afraid of the most. So when you start to understand you can be with any negative emotion, it really frees up what you're capable of in the world. And then you can open up anything in front of you. So here's where it gets interesting, and this is what's going to bridge us into the next episode. And it's simply that the physical pain, whether it's chosen pain or unchosen pain, we're talking about the workouts or an injury, for instance, it's the clean signal. It's the body's clean signal. It's clean pain. Emotional pain, negative emotion, is clean pain as well. Where it becomes what I would call dirty pain or suffering is when we add more to it. And that's what we're going to explore in the next episode in this Clean Pain series, is the suffering that we as human beings tend to add to any of our pain and make things worse, make our lives worse. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. One is that emotional pain is data, it's information, it's not dysfunction or a mistake or that something's wrong. You cannot selectively numb the negative emotion. You're going to numb so many things. You're going to numb all of you. And keep in mind that we have neural pathways. The same way that you would tie a shoe and the same way that you would learn how to do something repetitive over and over, it's an easy pathway. It's easy to fall back into that. If we're accustomed to feeling negative emotion or being stuck in negative emotion or stuck in chronic pain, physical pain, that neural pathway becomes easier and easier. We've got to practice processing it and practice being with it to move through it versus just being in it all the time. So we don't want to just numb, then we become more numb. We don't want to just be afraid of the emotions, then we're going to become more afraid of the emotions. We want more of being able to be with it, being able to move through it, being able to process it. And that is the skill, that's the pattern, that's the neurological pattern that we want more of. The next takeaway is that unfelt pain, it doesn't disappear. Your body will hold it. Your body will keep the score. You will feel it in some form or another in your body. And naming your emotion precisely unlocks your ability to actually act and process and take action. I'm stressed is the noise. I'm grieving the thought of what my future was going to look like. That's precise. Naming that thing that's really causing the pain, it's my thought that I'm losing the future that I thought I would have when I'm thinking about divorce. And lastly, discomfort, negative emotion, it's part of that price of admission for a meaningful life. And you deserve a meaningful life. Now, I'm going to tell you how important this episode is to me. Not only did I pre-plan this series as I do any of my episodes, I research them, I plan them, I think of who I want to impact with them. Not only did I do that with this series, but I also recorded this episode yesterday and had technical difficulties, and it caused some negative emotions because of my thoughts about it. I was like, this shouldn't be happening. I put all this work into this. I just recorded 40 minutes of a podcast, and all of those thoughts led to frustration, irritation, annoyance, and I was able to be with it. And this episode, this content is so important for people. Not everybody's going to be able to hear it from me, but some people will be able to, and it will be helpful for some people. And it's the ticket to a meaningful life. And that's why it was so important to me to get through and process a few small negative emotions in order to do this again and record this again. So if this is something that you know will be impactful for somebody in your life, by all means share it and listen to it again, because I know there's probably a few things in here that may be foreign, maybe you haven't heard before, or might be really impactful or important for your situation in life. So by all means, listen again. Keep doing what you do. Be up to whatever serves you in your life. Keep being empowered. Have a wonderful week. And the last episode in this series will be next week. Have a wonderful day.